Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for coming back together for a conversation with Joe Fifer. Let's say thanks again to our 2020 LTC sponsors, Parallon, Patient, Cenex, and Russell Investments. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Joe Fifer, President and CEO. Joe, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and hi everybody. It's this, this is a season of doing things that is different and weird. I'm speaking to people that I can't even see. We've all become accustomed to Zoom calls, but this one I can't even see you, and so we're. But thank you for hanging in there. We were talking ahead of time before we started about the dedication that you have on a Friday afternoon. I know here in Michigan it's an absolute beautiful day, and my guess is it's nice in a lot of different places. And then there's this pent-up demand from at so many places where you haven't been able to do things. So for those of you that are hanging in there with us this afternoon, I thank you for doing that. And let me just start by, like I always like to do with this group, is just thank you for what you do. With all the changes and all the things that, over many, many years of how things are different at HFMA, one thing that remains the same is our gratitude for our volunteer leadership. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't start with that. I just really appreciate it. Multiply that by some some big factor in terms of leadership in a time like this. Thank you. Just as simple as that, but as profound as I can make it. I really appreciate that. I understand you had a good morning. Tracy was filling me in on some of the conversations, and leading in a virtual way is a challenge for all of us. Sounds like a lot of the things that are on your mind are things that are on our minds and that we are dealing with. And I wish I could, start by saying, "Hey, ask anything," because I have all the answers. That'd be a lie because I don't. But that's always the case. But let me just remind you that this time is. It's your time. It's not a time for me to do a presentation. I'm just going to, open it up from here. Just envision those of you that have been in these before, that, I'm standing in the front of the room and you're all sitting around round tables and asking questions. And I'll do my best to answer. And I'll be, honest and frank as I always am. There's a lot of things that I may not know the answer to. I have some able-bodied assistants here with me to bail me out, and then there's going to be some things that that I don't know the answer to. None of us know the answer to, and so we'll just work through that together. Because the reality is we are all in this together, and so with that, I'm just going to open it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know this is hard for you to believe, but we already have questions coming in.
Oh, good. So I was just say, I think what's going to happen is you're chatting. They're going to type their questions in the chat, and Tracy's going to screen out the tough ones. I mean, no, she's going to relay those questions. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we're just going to do the best we can. So Tracy, why don't we just start, and then keep, if you have questions, type them in there, and we're just like if this was in a live room. I'm sure people leave that environment without a chance to ask your question. That might be the case here. The beauty of chat is when we have questions that we don't get answered, then we can follow up after the fact. And I'm sure that there's a game plan in place to do that, or we'll just figure that out. But I promise you that if you put your questions in there, we'll get them answered either now or after the fact.
Right. So if everybody could put their questions in the Q&A, that would be great. And I do see some in the chat as well. The first one that came in, Joe, is what have been your biggest challenges from the association's perspective?
Oh, gosh. That was plural, right? Challenges.
Yeah, challenge. Yeah, yes, yeah. Challenges.
If I had to reduce it to one, that would be really, really hard. There's a combination of things that come to my mind, and not to start on a downer, but just the disappointment of, we've made a lot of investments over the years in a brand new platform, investments. And I'm grateful that we did that because they positioned us well to react the way we have. But, the reality is, and you guys all know this, is that we've been in an operating loss for a couple of years, and we were just getting to the point of seeing the end of the, light at the end of the tunnel. And then wham, this is a big hit. And, we reschedule some of the spring meetings. That was a margin hit. Annual conference, of course. And while Bill and his team have done a great job of as much recovery as possible, it's not going to be the same either financially or from a connection standpoint that we normally have. And so that disappointment of being, coming back and then having another, really tough blow, that's been hard. Just the work effort required to restructure everything that we do. And literally everything that we do. I mean, we flipped a switch and said, I remember it was a Friday. I mean, it was in that era when people were starting to shut down and we were going to close the office. And now I will preface this with we have a work at home environment anyway, and people have PCs. And so this wasn't a huge lift, but it was still a big thing. We on a Friday said, we're closing the office Tuesday. You got Monday to come in and get your stuff. And after that, we're closed. And, we flipped a switch and that was a major shift. And so then based on that, everybody working on home, we had to restructure how we do everything. And just like many of you in your work environments, that was a learning environment and a process that we had to come accustomed to. So that was that was a big challenge. And restructuring annual conference. I thought this morning of here it is in 2020, and it reminded me of 2010. And Mary, this jives with you. That was the year that there was a flood in the Opryland, and it was like 6 weeks before what was then ANI.
Yep.
And we had to recalibrate. When I say we, this was before my time as CEO. But we had to recalibrate and do everything in Vegas. And I remember thinking, gosh, that was like a one-time thing. We'll never have to do that again. Well, we had about 6 weeks to recalibrate to relocating our annual conference to virtual. And so I don't know what's going to happen in 2030, but all I know is that every 10 years, something big happens. And so that's been a big shift. Just big decisions. The last thing I guess I'll say, and this is more on the personal level than anything else, but and I'd be lying if I said every moment of every day I was just confident that everything was going to work out in the long run. I mean, I've had my moments. There's a weekend a few weeks ago that I just gosh, I was down in the dumps thinking, oh my gosh. But then, the reality sets in, and I think about the infrastructure that we have, and I think about the people that we have, and then conversations that we have, and we are going to be fine. We are going to get through this. But those moments where you just have that doubt of, such a big financial hit and such a big emotional hit and a big connection hit and a major change of what we do, sometimes it feels overwhelming. And I'd be lying if I said that I was perfect all the time and I never had those doubts, because I have. And those are scary. As a CEO, I got to tell you, those are scary moments when I have doubts. Again, don't take that out of context. I really do feel good about what we're doing, and we're not out of the woods by any means. We're a lagging indicator in the association world. And so some of this is going to play out over time, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some of those issues. But yeah, some of those moments that some of those moments of fear and doubt are scary, and so those have been real challenges for me personally.
So talking about virtual conferences, we had a question about, will you share any information on Fall President's meeting? Heard a rumor. ...
Rumor. Do we start a rumor, Tracy?
I know, rumor has it.
So, but the Fall President's meeting will be virtual. But here's the deal. The reality is, in all likelihood, we're not going to be able to do any live meetings the rest of this year. But here's the other part of the reality, and I'm kind of saying this, in jest, but kind of not. We have contracts that we have to deal with, and we don't want to make a big public announcement, a big public statement, because we have to deal with those contracts, and they're all, each of these events has different contracts, and Mary and Gretchen and their team, they're sorting through that, and so don't book travel. Plan on. I think we're probably doing the same timing. Well, we'll figure that out, but
Yeah.
But it's going to be virtual, and so we're getting better and better at doing things virtually, as evidenced by this. And we'll figure out. We'll learn from this morning's sessions and how they worked and how we can build on those. But yeah, we're going to need to do those virtually.
So with that, have you seen any good ideas about how to keep sponsors engaged and supportive?
Yeah, so obviously that's one where I wish I had a playbook, page 38, where I could just pull it out and say, oh yeah, here's what you do in a pandemic. That playbook doesn't exist. So we're working on those relationships. Now, I will say to you that, next week is annual conference, and, we started out with telling, so go back in time, right around when we made the decision to go virtual. It was not that long after HIMSS had made their decision, and, they angered all their business partners, and we said, we are not doing that. And so we allowed refunds. We allowed, other ways that they could spend their money. But then we quickly started to turn around and say, how can we, maintain as much sponsorship as we could? And it's not to the level that we would be in if they were, doing the exhibit hall and we were going live, but it's one heck of an effort. So here's the reality. Our business partners need to be able to make contact. They still have services and products to sell, and they still want to make connections. And so what we're doing is we're just trying to figure out, we have some ideas, we're asking them what their ideas are, we're trying to figure out a new model, we're constructing it as it goes, and we're learning as we go, and that will continue. The nice thing is what I said is they still have a business to run, and part of running that business is making contacts with provider organizations, as an example. And the business partners can't just sit back and not do any marketing. So there's an environment there where I think both sides are hungry and interested in coming up with ways, and we're learning that as we go. So I don't know, Bill, if there's any other specifics that you'd want to tie into that answer, but overall we're figuring it out.
Yeah, we are figuring it out, and I think the most important thing that we could do is listen to what our business partners are interested in. We didn't just take things out of the box and hand it to them. It really came from a collaboration of our team with the business partners to understand what they needed to have a meaningful presence with our annual conference, and we did a pretty decent job putting together programs for that. As I always share, we are happy to provide you with examples of what we've done to help with your own programming. Rita Walker and her team do an outstanding job with presentations around that. And if it's not already in some of the resource kits, we can make sure that you've got those examples to see.
Well, and I would encourage people that, a couple more things. One is use the community groups, to share ideas and learn and see what other people are doing. The other thing is that maybe, we've had a long-standing and pretty firm, rule against, allowing sponsors to get up on stage and, do marketing and advertise and sell their services. Maybe you need to relax that a little bit. Maybe you give them some FaceTime and let them do a 1-minute commercial as they introduce, a virtual session and things like that. We just have to be flexible, and maybe some of our long-standing traditional quote rules, you have to bend a little bit here, and because again, we as an association have a desire for their continued sponsorship. Our business partners have a desire to continue marketing, and so in that we've got to be a happy medium where you can make this work. I know that's not, again, a specific answer, but this is one of those where there's not a one specific answer how to do it.
Hey, Joe, the other thing that I would mention, Rita, we've been working with Rita to do a survey with our business partners. And, we've really tried to construct it to make sure we understand what is it that they need, what meets their needs, what meets our needs. And so, Bill and I, once we get that, that'll help shape our programming. But we could certainly share those results as well with chapter leadership from a programming perspective. So
yeah,
right.
And I know there's a couple chapters that have done that in regions that I was just on yesterday, had already reached out to their business partners and revamped their entire sponsorship, which we do have in the community in the library from a couple different chapters from a best practices.
Yeah.
So.
And to Joe's point, we do engage the business partners and we give them a voice in our programming, but Mary and I are really careful that voice doesn't influence the programming. There's still solid solid content coming out of there.
Yep.
But we're working with business partners in different ways so that they've got great subject matter expertise that they can bring to those programs.
Right.
So we're hearing a lot of chatter about membership in the Q&A and in the chat. So I'm kind of blend some of these, Joe.
Yep.
First they said, hi, Joe from Arizona. So we want to give a shout out to Arizona. It's early in the new year, but how are the renewal metrics this year compared to previous years? And are we already seeing the declining numbers that everyone is assuming?
Well, first of all, I think the high from Arizona is, some folks know we purchased a winter home in Scottsdale, and we had to come home early into Michigan this year because of all the craziness, and we wanted to be closer to the office and closer to family, and so high back to Arizona. It's my second home. The membership, that's a risk, and that's one that's a little nerve-wracking. Bill, I'm going to tee you up for a second to give some numbers, but just let me just talk conceptually for a second. We have two blocks of membership now. You got the individuals and enterprise. So let me start on the positive. The enterprise actually has is going better than I expected. Now, we already got a renewal from, so you might remember, and going way back 3 years, Trinity was our first enterprise client. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, here we go. First one right out of the gate, what's going to happen here? And they renewed. And, you all saw, and I'm sure we have Trinity folks on the call, but, you all saw they were, leading the charge, at least publicly, with furloughs and layoffs way back when. And in that environment, they renewed. And so I can't think of a stronger statement for the value that they're receiving. And I talked to both their COO and CFO. Both made strong statements to me about the value that they're getting out of this. So that's the first official renewal. Now, the other environment is I was afraid that people would just back out mid-contract. And so and we've not experienced that either. And so, checks still come in, and people are hanging in there with us. And when I say hanging in there, it's just because I understand it's just that's a statement out of pure empathy as to what health systems are dealing with these major losses. But, I think what these health systems are saying is we have to continue, even in this time, to invest in our leadership development, and they're seeing value in what we deliver. So again, we got a long way to go, and I'm not declaring victory yet by any means, but a couple good signs right out of the gate with our enterprise clients. On the individual membership side, that's harder to, that's a whole bunch of individual decisions coupled with organizations that, might be pulling back on how much they, whether they will reimburse dues or not. And so, we fully expect that our renewal percentages to be less than prior years. We've modeled it all. We've modeled it down to a really scary number. I'm glad to say that we're running at a rate that's higher than the really scary number. We're tracking. What we kind of targeted is we're tracking it daily, and Bill will kind of give you some details in a second. It's not going to be where we were in prior years, I don't think, but it's also, it's one of those where we're going to look and see what it looks like at the end of June, and then, figure out where do we go from there. And so it sounds like a wishy-washy answer. Bill, maybe you can give them some numbers, but
sure. I'm
cautiously optimistic that even though it's not, there's no way it's going to be at the same level that it has been in prior years. I'm pretty optimistic that it's not going to be worst case, and that it's a level that we can somehow deal with.
So the majority of our individual members are still renewing in that May period. That's our largest class of renewals, even though we now have rolling anniversary dates. A year ago, at the end of May, 71% of the members who would have their membership renewed their membership in May. That's 71% in fiscal 19. This year, that number ended for May at 51.4%. each week we saw it grow a little bit more. So it's less, the pace is a little bit lower than previous year. However, last week we had 900 folks renew in a period of a week. So they're coming back. We're being really sensitive in terms of how we approach those folks that are renewing and trying to meet them where they're at. I saw in the Q&A something about cold calls, and we do work with a telemarketing firm to help us reach out for those renewals. And they've got scripting, and we're expecting them to be sensitive to where folks are, whether they've been furloughed or having a hard time. We've also got solutions for them if there's a hardship that needs to be addressed, or we need to extend their terms for a little bit to get them through a rough patch. So we're being really careful about that. But the truth is, we've got to continue to reach out and attempt those renewals. The other side of that is that we continue to acquire new individual members. Last year at the end of May, we had about 243 new members. This year at the end of May, we had 322. So we're still seeing significant individual member growth, which is a good sign. And I think it's representative of the real strong content that we've got and folks that are looking for solutions during these times. A couple other quick items that I'll mention is with Enterprise, we've signed contracts the last couple of months. We're up to 20 critical access hospital contracts at this point. And there's 119 enterprise organizations now in the fold. So we've blown way past that 100 organization milepost a while ago. And I know we had a shout out to Trinity. I even saw that in the chat box. There's 1,452 Trinity members in the organization. So yes, renewals are a little off. We wonder if paper invoices are going to mail rooms and people are working remotely and they're sitting in mailboxes, and that's why we do things like telemarketing as well.
You know, I'd kind of end this with, and this sounds a little trite, but it's so true. You know what it does? It comes down to value. You know, are people seeing value in their membership? And I'm not naive to the psychology of if I lose my ability to get my dues renewed, you know, then I won't renew. The reality is if people really see value in HFMA membership, you know, $435 is not that much of an investment in your career. And then you can start down that path of making comparisons there. But they have to see value. And we are absolutely driven. And you know what, this is not new to us. This is it's so much about this pandemic that has not really, there's some that have changed trends, but there's so much that's happening now that it's not a change of a trend, and then it's an accelerant to the trends that were already in existence. So we've been driving hard at increasing the value that we deliver to our members, and that's going to ultimately you know, drive both enterprise and individual renewals. And so we all have to work on that. It's just continue to drive value so that they, no matter what, no matter whose, you know, purse or wallet this is coming out of, whether it's organizations or individuals, that they're doing it because they see value in it. So
there was one question specifically around value, Joe, is how do we provide the value this year so that our members, especially enterprise members, reinvest dollars? You know, in the ROI, there's been a couple of questions about the return on investment. What, you know, how are we handling moving forward to secure those memberships?
yeah, so again, in a conceptual way, this is no different than it was pre-pandemic, and that is it's a combination of value of content and services that are provided at the association level and value and content that's driven at a chapter level. The difference is we're doing it differently and much of it done virtually. So I'm just so grateful that we made the decision to adopt the platform that we did a few years ago. You might remember the Polaris project, and that's where we designed the new platform. We basically re-tagged all of our content so the search would work better online. We're streamlining, you know, that. We're not done with that, by the way. We're in the process of investing in a new LMS to make that the whole process even better. But that's also where we develop these community groups that enable people to connect and and so forth. And I know, again, we're going to continue to expand and blow that out. And so, utilizing that, but that doesn't change that trend, and that we just need to continue to do that both locally and at the chapter. And so, how to do things virtually at the chapter level is going to look different all over the country. And I can't answer that, and you wouldn't want me to answer that because it's going to look different in one chapter versus another. But I do know that there's ways to drive value at a local level. There's ways to drive value at an association level that will be meaningful to all of our members. We just have to do it differently.
So can you tell us about the theme for 2020-21?
Is there a theme for 2021? There is. So first of all, I don't know if you haven't seen Mike Allen's video that he did a couple weeks ago, and it was it's kind of his farewell, but wait a minute, I'm not leaving yet message. It was really well done, and it was cute and meaningful and passionate and all the things about HFMA. But within that message, he said, "We're retiring the Dare You to Move." And I think this isn't a quote, but in essence, he said, "It's not that I'm stopping you, to daring you to move. It's just time to move on." So then we sat back and think, well, we can't operate without a theme, and so we kicked around a whole bunch of ideas, and so our theme for the year is your challenge. Your challenge. I'm sorry. Yeah. Holy smokes. Your challenge, our mission. And so you'll see that. I think the formal release of that, I think, is next week. Is that right? Although I don't think it's probably the worst held secret in the world. But
it's posted to the Chapter Resource Center under, it is.
So anyway, that's the whole idea behind it is it's a statement of empathy and support for our members. Empathy of, what's going on in your world, and support that comes from us. And so we have logo and words, and I'm sure all that stuff is in the process of being distributed. And I would encourage you to use it just like a chair's theme. And so there'll be messaging all year long that's along these lines, just like a chair's theme. It's just not coming from an individual's heart. It's coming from all of our hearts about, what's going on. And again, it's a statement of empathy about what's going on.
So like the association, many chapters are dealing with high cost contracts and how that will impact our chapter's financials. Any ideas or association resources that might help with these situations and contract reviews?
Yeah. So again, we're dealing with that with association contracts. Each contract's different. So, this is another one where it's impossible to say, hey, here's what you can do, and you just, apply that to all these contracts all around. Don't take this next comment out of context, but they kind of have to be resolved locally because you originated them locally. Now, that being said, we have some good experience and some good expertise, and between Tracy and Gretchen that works for in Mary's group, and a host of others, we just ask the question, and we'll see if we can help you navigate through that process. We can't do it for you. They're your contracts, but we do have some learnings that we could share with you. And so I would just, again, go through Tracy, and she can, navigate where to get that help within the association to, help you when we can. I mean, that's one of those things that we're here to help, and we really are. Gosh, that sounds like the IRS, doesn't it? That sounds terrible. But I mean it. I really do mean it. But,
you're from the government, Joe. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't. I got to come up with a different way of saying that, don't I? But it's true. Anyway, ask the question. I don't know, Mary. Anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, and so we have learned a lot, and again, can work with Tracy in terms of how to best share. But one of the things we would just say to you right now, that timing is everything.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here saying we don't think there's going to be any more live meetings this year, but we can't cancel X, Y, or Z until we're closer.
Yeah.
Because in most of those contracts, I've learned now what the French term force majeure means, or as Bill would say, manure. And And so you need to be careful about how you position it, so you
Yep.
just don't end up, with a penalty of some type. I'll tell you what we are learning is that the hotels are really willing to work with us. And in some cases, we'll dangle a carrot that says we'll rebook 2022, 2023, and that has been successful as one of our other strategies on a couple of things. So, but happy to share whatever else you need to know.
And
We've learned a fair amount. Yeah.
We've shared some in the community, but I have also helped individual chapters, and Gretchen and I work really closely together in order to kind of answer and navigate some of those questions. So going back to sponsorship, how is, and I think we answered this a little bit, but how is the association going to handle sponsorship and providing the return on investment going forward? So, we're going to survey our sponsors. Is there any other thing in place to make sure the return on investment is there?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
There are things that we can measure, and then there is just value of things like thought leadership that we're not going to be able to necessarily measure. But through executive connections as one example, we're guaranteeing that they're going to have 8 to 20-minute meetings with influencers in the organizations that they're targeting. So there are some measurable results that we can apply to that ROI. And then it's paying attention and listening. We're going to learn some things next week with the annual conference and some of the offerings that we've provided for sponsorship. And it may mean afterwards that we have to regroup and provide additional solutions to meet expectations. So I think it's patience and working together and knowing that we're experimenting here. I saw in the Q&A box just a few minutes ago, someone asked, how do I avoid failing? I think we just have to be receptive to mid-course corrections. We can't be afraid to fail. It's just admitting it and figuring out what to do next.
Well, hey, let me just jump on that for a second. Here's the only failure is if you don't care. Anything else is not a failure. Just try something, and don't measure success or failure by just the margin of your event or the numbers or whatever. I was thinking the other day about. In fact, I don't know if I was teasing you, Tracy. So maybe we'll just put the chapter balance scorecard back into place.
Yeah.
Oh no. No, we have to get away from this idea, and it made sense even when we did that then. I feel more strongly about that now. This is not about measuring success or failure based on the numbers. Success or failure is only based on effort and attitude. And if you try something and it doesn't work, that is not a failure. So, and I mean that. I'm saying that to our staff, and I'll say that to you as volunteer leaders. And share your successes, share your stories, whether they're successes or not. If you tried something and it didn't work, hey, we could all learn from that. This is a massive learning environment, and so just giving it your best, you're not going to fail. Some things will work better than others.
Yeah. This is seems to be an uptick in our state about enterprise contracts with smaller hospitals and also health systems. Does this give you hope for membership and sharing up operating losses for HFMA?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't just resolve it, but we knew going into enterprise that was just by studying other places and doing some market research, that was just a more stable environment. Now, the risk you run is when you lose one, you lose a bunch. But the retention rate historically of enterprise type memberships versus individuals has been significantly higher. So it does give us hope, and now time will tell, right? We signed these 119 contracts over a 3-year period, and so they'll start coming in over time. Early returns look good, but yes, the short answer is yes. We do think that that's a more stabilizing factor. Now, it doesn't answer all of our economics. I mean, live meetings is a big one, and that's probably the next really big thing that we have to adjust to, and we're doing that. And so I'll just be honest with you, what we told our board, the board's been terrific in this, is saying, because I said to them early on, hey, we got to decipher between short-term and long-term impacts. And we have a strong balance sheet. We started this whole process with 400 some days cash on hand, and the board's been really good about agreeing with me, saying we're going to take the real short-term impacts, take that out of our balance sheet, and we have to adjust to the long-term trends, long-term impact. And that's what we're trying to sort out is over these few months, as to the best we can. It's not going to be perfect. Sorting out short-term versus long-term. And, we'll probably have to make some adjustments on a long-term basis of, how we deliver content and, how we do meetings and all those things that we're talking about. But, looking to get that restabilization. But, a big one is trying to judge, what does the live face-to-face meeting environment look like going forward? And, we're going to have to make some judgments here relatively soon that try to predict the psychology of America. Well, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, and that's going to be tricky to do, but we're going to give our best shot. But that's probably the next big thing that we have to figure out, how do we adjust to, is that live meeting audience. And of course, with this group, man, I'm just speaking to your heart, aren't I? So much of what happens in the chapters is based on live meetings. And so we're just going to have to, and here's the other thing, that's going to be different regionally throughout the country. The psychology of America is not one psychology across the whole place. I mean, there's different attitudes. And so that environment is going to look different in one part of the country versus another, in one state versus the other. So again, another one of those where it's no good answers yet, just a good learning environment we're going to have to adjust to.
Well, I'm going to ask an easy question now because the next one's hard. So you might need to rest for just a minute. So is there a way to put together a 1, 2, 3 step set of instructions on how to put on a virtual meeting, on-site or virtual meetings, on a very economic basis, include instruction, equipment, and possibly a resource to get some of us going? And the answer is yes. We have resources out there currently for virtual meetings, and they're not maybe all together. So we will work on putting that together in a step 1, 2, 3 in instructions. And the reason that we're using Zoom is because it is economical for everybody to use, as well as some of the functionality. It has the interactive break rooms and different things that's included in your meeting license. So that is nice. And we've also used free options when we're doing the LTC. Mentimeter has a free option, and that's some of the interactive questions that we've had in other sessions. And so we'll put all the information with the pricing out on the Leadership Connection community. So I'll take that one for you, Joe, because this next one's a doozy.
Yeah, I noticed you took the easy one.
I know, right? All right,
No.
so here it is. How is
And I just want to say real quick, give Tracy and team props. I think Mary would agree. We have pulled. Tracy and the team have led the charge and helped shape a lot of what we're doing with the annual conference as a result of it. So they're the ones that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
We have a great group.
Bravo.
Thank you. So this comes in a timely manner, Joe, is how is HMA handling diversity and racial discrimination? I don't believe we have addressed this as an organization.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question. And this is, and Mary and Bill can attest to this because I've been talking about it. This is weighed heavily on my heart. I did make a decision that I didn't want to join what sometimes feels like these kind of standard statements made to the public, because those sometimes are not from the heart, and they're temporary in nature, and they're just kind of done. That's my cynic side of me thinking sometimes it's just to, cover your tracks a little bit. And I will tell you, here's the honest truth that, at first, I just wondered if this was our place to even make a statement. Now, in hindsight, that was a mistake. But I'll be honest. I mean, it's what was going on in my head is like, oh my gosh, we got a lot we're trying to solve here. We're trying to figure out how to operate, turning everything upside down. Yeah, first week or so after this George Floyd murder took place is, obviously I paid attention to it, but I thought it was not our place to make a statement. Well, but at the same time, I listened and I learned and I started talking to people, and some of the people I talked to were some of our past board members. A good friend of mine is James Stewart, and he's retired now, but he used to be a reimbursement guy for Cedar Sinai and a past board member, and he was on the board when I was chair, and he's a black man in LA, and so I reached out to him, and in fact, I got to tell kind of a funny story. He says to me, "Can't tell you how many of my white friends are reaching out to me for advice on what I should say." And I said, "Yeah, sorry, James, I'm I'm another one of those guys." But he's just been terrific in helping me understand, and he told me a couple things that were just really compelling to me. I mean, one is, he said, honestly, Joe, he said, there's a lot of stuff that that I suppressed and I didn't even talk much about, much less expect my white friends to to talk about, and things that I've some of this racism is so pervasive that I didn't even want to talk much about it, and I just wanted to pretend that it wasn't there. And this incident and this rage that's in the country now, he's even brought some of those thoughts to his mind that, and I thought, my gosh, that's really revealing. I mean, 'cause that's what I was feeling, but here's this black friend of mine who's saying the same thing. I will say, and then I'll get to what you'll see here soon. I don't know if there's anybody in the group that's got any ties to media, and I will almost apologize for what I'm going to say, but I'm not really going to apologize. I am just sick and tired of how any issue gets depicted in the media, and this one is no exception. Now, the transparency is good. I'm a huge believer in transparency in a lot of ways, and you guys know that from healthcare, but the notion that all these issues are binary in nature and you're either good or bad, you're either Black Lives Matter or you're advocate for the police, or you're this or you're that, and nothing. The reality is this stuff it's deeper than that, and there's more to the story. And so I am not at all supportive of calling police pigs. I think it's disgusting. It's just like any other name calling that happens. I am not at all supportive of riots. It happened all over the country, including my hometown of Grand Rapids. In fact, a good friend of mine's son was down there watching this, and he's kind of traumatized by some of the behavior. But you'll hear in my annual conference presentation next week, I say in no uncertain terms, racism is wrong. Racism is rampant. It's often hidden. Here's another thing that was absolutely compelling when I heard this. So I don't know if you've heard of the talk. So the talk is a conversation that either parents or some adult interested party has with the young black folks, but more black men than anybody else, as they enter their teens, or sometimes multiple times as they start driving. And it's not about where babies come from, but this is a talk about how to survive. And so I asked James, I said, tell me about this. Is this real? Again, because of my skepticism, I'm seeing this and stuff that's it's written. So I'm wondering if this is, I'm a data guy and I will love numbers. How often does this happen? I could get good data on this, but I asked him, I said, is this a real thing? And he said, absolutely. Because I had my talk several times. I had the talk several times with my boys. And not only but he said, that is what happens in the black community. And my reaction to that is, if that's not a statement of how pervasive racism is in this country, what is? So I made a statement that you'll hear next week at annual conference opening session. I'm going to couple that with a statement soon to our membership. I'm not going to make a big public announcement. I want to talk about these issues. I want to start to raise the awareness. And, you know, honestly, as I've learned from a number of conversations I've had, not just with James, with a few other folks, Tammy Galinda's, I forgot to mention her. I had a lengthy conversation with her, you know, about this issue, talked to her about the talk, talked to her about some of these issues. I've had a number of conversations with others. I've listened to some podcasts and I've read, and, you know, what's come back, you know, really loud and clear is step one is, you know, just this is my interpretation. This is part of my message. Just stop what you're thinking right now, no matter what it is. Just stop and allow yourself to go to step two, and that is to be curious, to listen, and to learn. And then step three is to care. Just care about the issue, and care about it with empathy. And that doesn't solve a lot, but this is such a deep-rooted issue in our society that and a lot to it, that it starts with learning and caring. And if we can do those things across society, yeah, I think we'll be better off. And that's what I'm going to encourage our membership to do. Now, how that plays out, you know, we had a diversity and inclusion task force a couple years ago, and you know, and we did some data digging on that time. There are not very many people of color in healthcare finance. There are not many people of color in HFMA. There are not many people of color in finance, period, in other industries. So this is not as simple as saying, well, just go out and hire people of color, or go out and do this, or go out and do that. Now, I'm not suggesting there doesn't need to be actions. There does, but you know, I think what we need to do is to think and care, and some of those solutions will start to present themselves. I am not going to let this conversation die. I will say that publicly, and that's the mistake I've made before, is thinking it was somebody else's problem to solve, thinking, hey, I got my own issues I got to solve, you know, not personally, but you know, organizationally, and so I wanted to focus on those issues, and you guys know those well. We're talking about some of those today. But you know, we just cannot keep putting this issue under the rug. I mean, my goodness gracious, it's been 60 years since Martin Luther King talked about, you know, issues and leading that charge back in the 60s. And here we are, we're still dealing. I talked to somebody yesterday in a major city in the South that, you know, there's country clubs that he's a person of color, he can't get in the country club. I'm not like, that's still happening? We're all still learning. And so, you got me on an issue that this has been weighing heavily on my heart. I've been told that I shouldn't look back with regret about lack of action, so I'm trying not to do that. I feel bad that I haven't been more active and more articulate about this in the past, or even more knowledgeable or more aware. But that's where we need to go. We need to increase the awareness and figure it out. So last thing I'll say, and again, I'm stealing thunder from what you'll hear in your conference next week, but I saw this video among a variety of things. It was a woman that was addressing these folks in an audience. The audience was seemingly all white. And you didn't look in total, but it looked like that. She asked the question, she says, how many of you in this room would like to be treated like blacks are in this country? Nobody raised their hand. And then she said, well, then why would you allow this to continue? And I'm like, whoa, you're right. So why would we allow it? It starts with learning and understanding and caring, and then we'll go from there. So that's what you'll hear from me. Membership's going to hear it. Some people aren't going to like that message. Well, it's reality, and I'll stick by it. So anyway, thank you for asking. We've got a long way to go on this, and I'm not perfect. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm certainly going to keep learning and listening, and I hope you all do too.
Well, thank you, Joe. I'll give you another easy one now, so you can, you know, get it.
That was fine. Yeah.
Can you tell us where we are on separating the survey that goes out to members from enterprise to regular members? And I can help you out with that one.
No, I don't know the answer to that, so please help me out.
We are very, very close, and hope to have that in effect before any more surveys go out. We're actually looking at all of our surveys and being more purposeful in what we're doing with those, instead of sending out ones that are specific for maybe the membership satisfaction. We can use some quarterly pulse surveys that capture this information, and so we're not over surveying our membership. So know that that is being looked at internally, and we have a team together that looks at that as well. So then how do you envision 2021 for HFMA? Should we prepare for a repeat of 2020?
Well, let me put on my my clairvoyant glasses so I can know exactly what 2021 is going to look like. A lot of that's going to depend on how we recover as a society. So, we're doing both the objective and subjective reviews of what's going on. The objective view is we have a couple different sources, not just our own internal data, but we have some sources of, ongoing trending survey data of what attitudes are for things like travel and doing things out of the home and, those kinds of things. So we're watching those trends. And then we're watching, obviously, the trends internally. And then, a lot of it's going to depend on, what people are willing to do. And so I don't think 2021 will be like 2020. The intensity of 2020, and just think about what it feels like today versus 2 months ago. 2 months ago, my gosh, it was just like nobody knew anything, and it was also new. And now we're kind of settling into still uncertainty, but we're starting to figure some things out, and we have some behavior patterns that we're figuring out. So 2021 is going to look different from 2020. Now, I will tell you that I'm in the process of at least entering into the conversation at the association level of what if? What if we can't have live meetings going forward? What if they never will be all that well attended going forward? And preparing for that. Now, first of all, don't take that out of context. But if we don't start thinking like that, we'll never be prepared. Because what if it doesn't come back the way it was? Now, I thought I saw one of the questions, pop up earlier, and I'll answer it as I answer this. But one of the questions, what about revenue cycle conference this fall? So again, this backs to what Mary was saying earlier. We can't make an official announcement. We got to figure out, but we're not going to be able to do that face to face. We're just not. And so we haven't made the official decision, and we got to figure that out. But don't buy a plane ticket because you probably won't. So what if that environment lasts? We can't just wallow in our misery about that and long for days gone past. We have to figure out how do we deliver our content that's meaningful to all of our members so that they can thrive. And oh, by the way, I do have my Thrive coffee mug, here from this morning, Molly or Mary. We have to figure out how to do that, and so we're doing that. And so 2021 will look different from 2020. I will say this: 2021 will look different from 2019. And how that looks different, we're figuring that out, and we will adjust. We will adjust accordingly. Now, I can't ever imagine an HFMA without an annual conference every year. So don't worry about it. We'll do that now. But I'm trying to think through. Maybe it's not as big next year, even close to as big, and maybe it's a different kind of a setting and different kind of an environment. But what if, and don't take this again, what if that's the only live conference that we can do at an association level? I'm just preparing ourselves for those kinds of things. Because if we prepare for that, and if we end up having live revenue cycle conference and we do a live, financial sustainability summit next spring, and if we do live thought leadership conference, et cetera, throw it all, you keep going down the road. Well, then great, because that'll be easy for us to get back to. But if we can't, and then we're going to thrive under that new environment as well.
So this next one is more about our industry. What have you heard time-wise or strategically on how the providers and systems across the country plan to recover from the monetary hit they have taken with all of this?
Yeah, so that's a crazy environment in and of itself. So it starts with the financial modeling that's been going on. It goes to trying to understand how the different stimulus packages are working. There's still a lot of lobbying going on to try to get these loans turned into grants. And so the accounting for, and then some of you are in this space, the accounting for, the data that went into the calculations, some of those were wrong. Some people had to return money because the calculations were wrong. It's crazy. I would not want to be a CFO trying to produce a set of financial statements that needed to be audited right now because there's a lot of uncertainty. Here's what I'm hearing. This year is going to be, obviously really, really difficult. The recovery of, and I hate this term, elective procedures, because some of this stuff is not very elective. But the return of those services that were put on hold or surgeries and those kinds of things, that's actually starting to come back pretty well. And kind of an overly simplified and maybe an average of comments that I've heard from CFOs, but getting that, about 90% of that lost revenue back is probably going to come back faster than what they thought a month or two ago. Getting that last 10% is going to be really challenging. And it's going to have a long tail, and it's going to move into 2021. And if you think about that, that's a concern because it's probably, I don't have data on this, but, my 39 years in healthcare would tell me that that's probably the more lucrative business for both hospitals and doctors. And so that's going to have a margin impact. And then you throw on top of that a payer mix shift that we're likely looking at because of large unemployment and shift to Medicaid and those kinds of things. These health systems they're planning for a challenging 2021, and they're reacting accordingly. So that's what I see. A quick early recovery, but doesn't get back to 100%, and then a long struggle to get back to where they were activity-wise pre-COVID.
We have a couple of questions about enterprise, Joe. One of the questions is, seems there is a lesser focus on enterprise program as individual members. Is this by design? Seems there has to be some real value adds on the upcoming renewals for enterprise members for them to continue a contract. For our chapter, we worry that we will lose large groups of the enterprise members with the expected expense cuts.
Well, I've addressed some of this. In fact, that last sentence, that was and is that my worry as well is that we'll lose that. But the premise of your question about more focused on individual than enterprise is that it seems like that. That's not the case. In fact, we have an entire game plan at the association level to monitor and manage those relationships, and we're continuing to develop the ways of content delivery and furthering the relationships on the enterprise side, so that we don't lose those contracts. And again, I mentioned earlier, we're looking at things like this, a new LMS that would further enhance the ability to deliver content both to individuals, but also then we'll structure that will fit really nicely into our enterprise relationship. So we continue to make huge time and financial investments in the enterprise model that keep to continue to grow that book of business, but also keep those folks happy and that they're seeing the value. The premise is really, to be blunt, it's not accurate because we're putting a tremendous amount of resources in there. We have, in essence, customer service people that are, making, regular contact with our enterprise clients. And some are more responsive than others. And sometimes when, what we get worried is when we try to call our enterprise clients and they're not responsive to us. That makes us really nervous because I'd rather get bad feedback than no feedback at all.
Right.
And so we're, there was one enterprise client that, we were not getting good feedback. We had bad vibes and, we made some mistakes on our end and, I'll give Bill props. He jumped in the car and went to visit him and, it paid off. So we're going to do whatever we can to keep those folks happy because that is going to be a really strong part of our membership base going forward.
And there's another question. Go ahead, Will.
One other quick quick point that I'll make to add on to that is we have a team that is engaged, and Rich Lucas, who's on the call, is running that team along with other folks from around the association, and their role is to continue to improve the enterprise experience and the product itself. So there is always constant feed and caring going into that structure.
So one of the other things here, and we'll wrap up with the last question, is engagement with new enterprise members is a key initiative. What are some best practices that we've seen, and is there any standardization of the welcome that we should follow? And we are having LTC July 10th around membership, and we'll have best practices for enterprise membership, but we also have one session that is all enterprise based that we'll be sharing a lot of that information on July 10th for the membership track of LTC. So the last question we have here, Joe, that we can ask is, how can we monetize virtual events?
Well, you know, a lot of that comes back to some of the things that we've talked about. And that's, you know, that the relationship and have those be meaningful environments for our business partners. So here's another kind of a stark and you know, frank reality that you know, that we might have to deal with both at an association and a chapter level. And I remember talking about this, you know, way back when, before, you know, the pandemic or all this. And this fits into this category of what this pandemic has done has been an accelerant of trends, as opposed to, you know, there's some new trends, as I said, but in a lot of ways, this is an accelerant. When you think about other parts of our society or other things that you get, how many things do you get now that you used to pay for, you get for free? And a lot of it is online. Or you get for, you know, $1.99, or, you know, something that, you know, you get access to something you used to pay a lot more for, and then all of a sudden you got an app that you pay $1.99 for, and you get access to it. That's a whole different monetization business model, right? And what if we're entering an environment where we have to deliver a whole bunch of content for free? What if there's other people out there that will deliver content for free? You know, so yeah, the question about how do you monetize virtual events is a really, really good one. And it's one where, again, there's not like there's this playbook that's out there that says, oh, here's exactly how you do it. We're going to have to continue to experiment. It's a lot of these things that we've talked about today. And we're learning. We've had, again, the start of some success with what we're going to do with the annual conference. But I'm sure we're going to debrief after the annual conference and come up with learnings that we're going to apply to our fall conferences. Come up with learnings there that are going to apply to next year's annual conference that I hope is not virtual. But my point being, we have to all keep learning, and that's going to be this. I think the answer to this question of how do you monetize virtual events. It's a little scary, but it's also one where if you approach it with curiosity and a can-do kind of an attitude, I think that those ways to monetize, you know, will become self-evident. Now we have some starting steps, and again, ask your questions of Tracy, and maybe there's ways, Bill, that we can, you know, give them some guidance on, you know, what we're learning, and then continue to add to that guidance of how we're sorting that out. And then Mary and her team, you know, they're doing it on the education side, and so we'll continue to, you know, to provide those learnings. So we can start with what we know now, and we are starting with what we know now, but you know, stay in touch, because that, you know, that's going to continue to evolve. I wish I had a more solid, thorough, you know, absolute answer for you. I don't, because this is all new for all of us, and yet the environment's there to do that.
And I think you said it perfect. We don't have a playbook, and we are learning at the same speed as everyone else. However, we have thought about this, and one of the comments that came in afterwards, Joe, is it makes it difficult to monetize virtual events when corporate doesn't charge for them. So know that this isn't something that is going to be standardized across the association. That we're thinking in the same, you know, thing. How can we, if we are in this virtual environment for a long period of time, you know, where is the win-win? So
And
as
I
soon as
and,
we,
and,
oh, I'm
and
sorry.
I understand that comment. And again, just don't. I'm throwing things out as example. But what if that market drives you to have to do those things for free? That's my comment. That's my point. It's not like we're making a decision that we're not going to charge for everything. That would be taking that comment out of context, and I don't mean to say that. So if I said it in that way, don't take it that way. It's just going to be different. I'm just preparing for worst case scenarios. What if the and I see the comment, we could be like Apple Music. The whole acquisition of music is so different now than just a few years ago, right? And so anyway, it's those kinds of things. If we don't get ourselves prepared for that kind of an environment, we're going to be making a mistake. So I hear what you're saying. Don't take it out of context, but then also don't disregard the fact that we're going to have to do things a lot differently, and maybe the revenue model is going to look a lot different.
Awesome.
And I see the question about lifetime membership. If somebody wants to write a check for like $100,000, they could be a member forever. So, I'm kidding. Who knows? I will tell you this: we have expanded the whole membership, payment environment. We got monthly. There's different models out there for membership. So that's one we can throw into the thought process and consider that. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe, for your time today. I know that we had some great questions. If we will be populating all of this information in the community as well. So we download all the Q&A with the answers, and this is being recorded. So please know that will be posted in the community by Monday. So we will make that commitment. Know that we have another session at 2:30 with the chapter advancement team going live with live Q&A. And they'll be answering a lot of the questions that came out of this morning's, and anything that you have going on for succession planning and trying to lead virtually, and the things that maybe haven't been answered yet today. So please join us at 2:30. Thank you, Joe, again, and we look forward to seeing everybody at 2:30. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Have a good
Take
one.
care. Have a great weekend.